What's up, BookTube? It's Leah Cooper, and it's been a while. I know. The last time you saw me on this channel, it was for, I believe, my Clear Your Shit-a-thon TBR video I filmed back at the end of May for the Clear Your Shit, for like the 1.5 readathon that happened in June. And man, I had some lofty ass goals for reading in June, and I didn't really hit them. I read a few things off that TBR, but life intervened, and I don't want to spend a really long time in this intro talking about it, but suffice it to say, I started writing full-time again. My partner and I bought a car. I went and visited my partner, long-term boyfriend, who lived in Illinois. I went and visited him for a month in the second half of August and the first half of September. I was very, very, very busy in that time period. Didn't do a ton of reading. I think I maybe read 2 books. And then he and I got an apartment, and I moved to Illinois in October. And between the end of my visit mid-September to the move in the middle of October, I was once again writing full-time, not really doing a ton of reading, and really just did not have the mental energy or capacity to do anything with BookTube. It always seems like in the summer I really, really, really struggle to both read a lot and also just to make content. I don't know what it is, but like August and September are like my worst months for BookTube, I think. And this year it was especially busy. So I am back. I don't want to just completely not document my reading. One of the things I've mentioned is that, like, this isn't a big channel. I'm not doing this to make money. I do this to have like a record for myself of everything I've read and my thoughts on the things that I've read, kind of like a journal, a video journal. And I don't want to let this whole 5 months go by where I have read things, not a ton, but I have read things. I don't want it to completely disappear into the ether. So today I am bringing you my summer reading wrap-up. We're going to go through the months of June, July, and August since I've been gone. I am in a new space. I am in my apartment in Illinois, which is weird. I wanted to do a vlog and I wanted to do an apartment tour, but it's a mess. We moved into a 1-bedroom apartment, and it's really small for the amount of stuff that we have. And so we are still trying to work on how to organize all of this stuff. And so maybe after I do that, I'm really hoping we're going to try to get a storage unit, I think, to put some of our stuff that we just don't have space for into long-term storage, and that way we'll have just more space in the apartment. And I really want to decorate for Christmas, so maybe if the stars align and the planets come into coalescence or whatever, and I'm able to do that, maybe then I'll do an apartment tour video or something. Not that anyone cares, but again, a personal record for my personal journey in life. I do have my bookshelf, and it is organized completely differently. I'm not going to do a bookshelf tour just because I don't find them very interesting. But basically, I got rid of the rainbow organization, and I did it by author in alphabetical order so that I could keep all the books by authors together. And so the genres are all mixed up, except for I do have one shelf, one cubby right down there that's nonfiction, but it can't hold all my nonfiction. So yeah, I got a lot of books. I also tried to like make it so that everything was more easy to get to. So I didn't stack the books like that like I did last time, but this means that there's like I've used up a lot more space because I haven't like crammed as much into each cube. I don't know. I don't like this situation. I love the way the cube itself looks, but I can't get my books onto the shelf in a way that makes sense that also looks nice. I don't know. Is the thing. Let's talk about the things that I read. Let's just move on. I got my laptop. I have my spreadsheet, and we're just gonna get into it. It's not a terribly large number of books. In June, which was supposed to be for the Clear Your Shit readathon, I believe I read 3 things, and one of them was my own book. So the first thing I finished was an audiobook, and I do believe this was on my Clear Your Shit readathon TBR, and that was A Wrinkle in Time. I was listening to this on audiobook, and it was a reread. I did read the first 3 books in the Wrinkle in Time series when I was a kid in like junior high. middle school that around that time, and I really loved them as a kid. And they're kind of like, I would say, probably one of my favorite book series from that era. And so I did recently watch, and by recently, gosh, it was probably almost a year ago, did watch the movie. Didn't love it. Decided to listen to the audiobook, and the audiobook was genuinely really good. I loved it, and the story, I really did quite love the story. There was also an amazing, was it an introduction from the author's granddaughter or something in this edition? No, I think it was a conclusion. I think it was at the end of the audiobook. The granddaughter wrote a really long outro talking about Madeline L'Engle. And that was really interesting too. So this was a great reread. It definitely stands up to rereading, and I do want to probably work through the rest of the books in the series, reread the 2 that I've already read, and also finish reading, is it the quartet or the quintet? I think it's a quintet. I think there's 5 books. Anyways, do want to work on that as my like ongoing reading classic children's books and revisiting childhood favorites. I definitely want to continue with that. This book was definitely not a letdown. I highly recommend it. Give it to a young reader. Read it as an adult. Both stand up great. The other thing I read in June, and these 2 books were finished literally within a day apart of one another. The other thing I finished in June, which I have a physical copy of, is Mossflower by Brian Jakes. And I know this was both on my 15 books to read in 2021 TBR, and it was also, which I packed all those little papers for all the books on this TBR, and I don't know where I packed them, which is not wonderful. Anyway, so this was on that TBR. It was also, I do believe, on the Clear Your Shit TBR. I don't know what prompt. This also was a childhood favorite and a reread. So this was the first, I want to work on rereading the Redwall books, because I loved the Redwall books again when I was in that kind of like middle school, junior high era, like 5th grade to 8th grade, and I want to start rereading them. I have a few of them, maybe like half a dozen or a dozen of them on my shelves, and Mossflower is not ever one of my super favorites, but I did like it, and it was a good reread. It was fine. It's very simple in its writing style. It's actually interesting to me how kind of like simplistically it's written and how long of a book it is. Like, it's definitely for a fairly young reader, it feels like, but for a voracious reader, like, it's really interesting, because like I don't know if you would get quite this, because this book is $3.76 in a mass market paperback, and the text is not huge. The text is almost the same size as what you get in an adult mass market paperback. So it's like quite a long word count, but it's written very simply. As I was reading it, I was remembering all the story plots and going, oh yeah, that's the twist. I didn't get completely swept away in it, but I do want to keep rereading them. And then, like I said, Mossflower was never like my favorite. There's definitely something super saccharine about that book that I was like, oh yeah, these are just sticky sweet. And also horrifically gruesome in parts. Like, there is so much death in them also, though, for like, again, the simplicity, so the perceived audience age. They're an interesting book. I think they hold an interesting place in like the middle grade canon of works, but I still enjoyed it. I would still pass it on to like a reader who is into fantasy, especially like adventure and swashbuckling fantasy, and like who wanted like big chunky books and was like read a lot, because you know, that's the kind of novel that would at least give a kid a little bit to chew on for a long time. Like, I say that as a kid who just like did nothing but like read, and so if the book was too short, if it was like less than 200 pages, you'd read it in a day, and then like you had to find 10 other books to read. So anyway, then the one other thing I read in June was, like I said, my own book. Not one of my print books. I thought it was, but no. I reread A Sanguine Solution, which is like the 4th book in one of my series, because I was prepping to write the 7th book in the series. It's complicated. There's 2 series. They're interconnected. They like go back and forth in the timeline. So I was reading the 4th book in one of the series so I could write the 3rd book in the other series, which is also chronologically the 7th book in the whole series. But I did read it. I finished reading it in June. But as you can see from those 3 things that I read, 2 of which were on my Clear Your Shit-a-thon TBR, but my TBR for that readathon was like 12 books. So obviously I didn't do super great. Moving on to July, I read 4 things, 3 of which were audiobooks. So July was a month where I was really focused on writing, and I also started packing. Partner and I knew at that point, while we were doing the car hunt, that we wanted to then look for an apartment and we wanted to move. And so I knew partner specifically wanted to move before the end of the year. And so I knew when I visited, we were going to be apartment hunting and hopefully finding a place to move before I had to travel back to Washington. And then hopefully I'd be moving soon afterwards. So I started packing, and basically I just listened to audiobooks while I packed and while I worked out. And that's all I got done. So the first thing I listened to was Kristen Britton's Blackveil. This is the 4th book in the series, and the one I liked least. This is the one that I had so many issues with one of the storylines in this book, and I think I'm like almost positive it's this book. And I remember when I finished it, I really wanted to get on here and film my wrap up and talk about it because I was so frustrated with that book, and I never got around to it. So I guess here we go. So this is the 4th book in the Green Rider series by Kristen Britton, which I have been listening to on audiobook. And I struggle with this book because, once again, we kind of have like 2 main points of view. There's more, but there's 2 primary ones, and one of them's Kerrigan as she enters Blackveil Forest with other Green Riders, the elves, and some soldiers. And that whole storyline is actually really, really interesting. I thought Kristen Britton's kind of like development of Blackveil Forest and the horror of the forest and what's hidden in the forest and that whole kind of mystery and how it resolves is really, really well done. And once again, like that last quarter of that book with all the excitement and all the action and all the fighting and Kerrigan at the center of it all was really, really good. And I loved that. However, the other like primary point of view in this book is Queen, I have forgotten her name. It starts with a C, I think. I can't remember her name. The Queen, well, she's actually not the Queen until like halfway through this book. The King, spoilers. No, well, I'll try not to be too spoilery, but her point of view, one of the male characters in this book is sexually assaulted, and it's framed in such a way by the author specifically, like these are authorial choices, where it's never said that it's rape, because you get the sense that like it's a guy, he enjoyed it because he has a boner in the scene, but he's like unconscious and drugged out of his mind and also like on his deathbed, and no one asks for his consent, and he doesn't necessarily want to have sex with this person, and again, drugged out of his mind on his deathbed, no consent, and the Queen rapes him. Like, I realize that she's kind of like cornered into doing it, but she does, and like they make her out to be the victim, but she's an active political player. And it really feels like author choices in this case. It really feels like a very antiquated view of rape and who can be raped. And it really does feel like the author doesn't necessarily conceptualize that men can be raped too. And I have huge fucking issues with it. And it's such a badly done thing, and it's also just like really shitty character development. Queen Astora, I was trying to remember her name, and it really just, I can't tell if Queen Astora is being set up to be a villain. I've since read like 2 books past this, I still can't tell, because like fundamentally after those actions she feels like a villain to me, but like I don't think the author is framing her as one, because of this I think this bias towards who she thinks can and can't be raped. And I don't think men can be from her perspective. And it sickens me, and it made me really, really frustrated and uncomfortable and just angry, like outright angry. And it's a bummer that like this book is marred with this point of view and this plot thread, because like I said, the Kerrigan half of the book is really good. But yeah, I was not happy. I gave that one 2.5 stars. After that, I listened to another audiobook. I couldn't get the next Blackveil or the next Green Rider book, so I listened to The Goose Girl by Shannon Hale. I believe a couple of months, I say a couple of months, at this point it could be like 6 to 12 months ago. I think I saw Kelsey over at the Fancy Hat Lady Reads mention this book. Like, I'm almost positive I remember her talking about this as kind of something she'd read recently, as like a kind of like almost like edging into classic YA territory. So this is written by Shannon Hale, and this book came out in 2003. So this would have come out actually when I was pretty close to of an age to read it, but I never actually read it, and I really liked it. I gave it like 3.75, 4 stars. It was very entertaining. I've mentioned this on my review for Shielded, that if the concepts or the plot points in Shielded sounded good to you, just read The Goose Girl instead, because I think the author of Shielded is a debut YA novel that came out in 2019 or 2020. I have a full review of it. It's more complimentary of the book than the book deserves. It's not a very well written book, and it's a very rough debut. Like, being perfectly honest and perfectly blunt, but it's about a princess who is on her way to marry a prince that she doesn't know. She's betrayed, and then she impersonates someone of a lower class to kind of like survive, and then she ends up inadvertently meeting the prince who she is intended to marry without actually realizing that that's her intended, and falling in love with him. So it's very clear to me that the author of Shielded has read The Goose Girl. Like, I think it's impossible for her to have not, and she was deeply inspired, we'll say, by that book. But yeah, just go read The Goose Girl. It's pretty good. I think it stands up. It's pretty fun, and it's got some great magic in it, and it's got a lot of really great friendships in it. It's got an adorable romance, and I think it's got some really good character development with the protagonist, the Princess Izzy. So yeah, I listened to that. Really enjoyed it. It's a full cast audio if you're interested in listening to the audio. I had to get used to that. The horse, the princess can talk to her horse, and when the horse was first introduced, I was like, damn, that's the voice of like Prince Charming. And then I am almost 100% positive that the same voice actor also did the voice of the prince in the audiobook, so I think I was correct. Okay, so the next thing I read was a short story. It's actually kind of like a piece of flash fiction from Daily Science Fiction, which is a online science fiction and fantasy short story magazine, but they deliver the short story every day to your email. It's really cool. I'll leave a link to them down below. They do publish stuff that's quite interesting. So this was A Garden of Snakes and Stone by Kay Shefford. And this is a piece of flash fiction from the perspective of Medusa. Gave it 2 stars. Didn't really land for me. But if you're interested in a piece of flash SFF fiction in your email every day, go check out Daily Science Fiction and Fantasy, because they're pretty cool. Then the last thing I read/listened to in the month of July was another audiobook, and that was the 5th book in the Green Rider series, Mirror Sight. So overall, I liked Mirror Sight, I guess, more than Blackveil, because it was almost entirely just from Kerrigan's point of view, and it's a weird one. So we've had some like time traveling elements in the series before, but this one takes place entirely in the future, and it's good. It's really weird from the rest of the series, because it's kind of taking place in like a Victorian steampunk England, but it's good. I liked it. I think I gave it 4 stars. Yeah, I gave it 4 stars. It was kind of like back to form for the series. Not my favorite, but it's like it's hard to talk about the series, especially Blackveil, because again, like the Kerrigan part of the book is like easy 4.25 stars, and then the Astora part of the book is a fucking 1 star. And so my feelings are somewhere in the middle, I guess. And so yeah, Mirror Sight is interesting, very long, but a good audiobook and a good book. And it was like, okay, I'll keep with the series because I'm liking this. I think it was, I'm definitely kind of glad that we got like that removal from like all the icky storylines I don't like, and some of the characters I don't like Alton. It was like really nice to have like a step back where we didn't have to have their POVs, and kind of like probably refresh me a little bit on the series. So yeah, I listened to that. I gave it strong marks, and that was everything I read in July. So then, in the month of August, like I said, I was visiting my boyfriend in Illinois. I was there for a month, and I was also aggressively packing for my move, and I still managed to read 5 books apparently. I'm shocked. I think it was like I finished a lot of books in August that I had like started in previous months. So, trying to figure out where to begin. The first thing I read in August. Okay, so apparently my camera shut off and I lost portions of me talking about the next 2 books. So the first thing I read in August was a book called 7 Deaths of an Empire by G.R. Matthews, which I received from the publisher as an ARC in exchange for a review. And I thought it was just like an epic fantasy, kind of a traditional Western epic fantasy, and that's why I was like excited for it, because I was reading the Christian Britain books and I just wanted more of that like multi-POV, long, sprawling, big world epic fantasy. But then it turned out to be a like Roman Empire inspired fantasy, and that made me like less excited. I did end up watching a couple of like historical Roman Empire movies, I guess we could call it. I made my boyfriend watch them with me, so we watched like Centurion, which was garbage, and Gladiator, which was good, and then The Eagle of the Ninth, which is like okay. And that kind of like whatever itch I had for that got scratched by those movies, and then so the book was a bit tedious to get through. But it's basically like 2 POVs. You've got like a general and a apprentice who is the grandson of the general, and it's being told from their alternating timelines. And the general was pretty good. Like for like most of the book, the general's POV was really interesting, but he kind of just gives up in the 3rd act, and like it was very disappointing to as a reader. And then the apprentice is annoying as fuck. But I'll let past me finish talking about this book. The apprentice is traveling with the army. The emperor dies while on campaign, and so he travels back with a contingent to protect the body of the emperor, which they have to get back to the capital for the ascension of the next emperor. The general is in the capital and is advising the young emperors, or the children of the emperor, who will be the next emperor, and trying to maneuver politically. And some of the like reveal stuff was really, really obvious and just kind of frustrating, and kind of the conclusions to the political machinations were not very interesting. And then, like I said, the character development of the magician apprentice character is so not there, and he's such an irritating, annoying character who does not grow. And yeah, it wasn't for me. I ended up giving it 2 stars. It might be your thing if you're a little bit more lenient on character growth. I just don't know. I don't know. And it just didn't feel... The magic didn't really feel... I mean, I guess the magic was kind of developed. They were trying... The author was definitely trying to have some conversations about, like, empire and imperialism, and was trying to use the magician apprentice character and a native... She's basically a Celt, or a Pict, and he's trying to have conversations about imperialism with these 2 characters, but it's just kind of, it just falls flat. It doesn't really go anywhere or make any conclusions or have any revelations or cause any real, like, not real growth. So, okay, let's move on. After that, I read a novella, and that was Fugitive Telemetry by Martha Wells. This was like a breath of fresh air. This, and also this is probably why I got so much read in August, because this book put me in such a good reading mood that it like carried me through the rest of the month. Like I just kind of wanted that feeling of like burning through a book and having so much fun with it. So Fugitive Telemetry is, I guess it would be the 6th installment in the Murderbot series, right? Because there's 4 novellas, then the novel, 4 novellas, then the novel, then this novella. And I guess technically this novella, really fucking awkward place to stop. So this novella is technically chronologically, I think, before the novel. So you can read it before you read the novel. You could just read the 4 novellas and then read this novella, or you can read it after the novel. It's really up to you. I'm like almost positive it takes place before the novel. It's a little bit disconnected from the rest of the timeline. It takes place on like the Free State space station, where Murderbot is working as like the security consultant for is it Mensa? I forget her name. The scientist that Murderbot's kind of been adopted by. And this is just like a traditional space station murder mystery kind of story. And it really just focuses on the mystery. And that's part of why I really loved it, because like the mystery was good, and I just love like sci-fi with a little noir hint to it, and that this book definitely kind of like hit those notes. So if you like sci-fi mysteries or like sci-fi noirish kind of stuff, you know, if you loved like the Odo episodes of Deep Space Nine, I think this is kind of fun. And it's Murderbot navigating like human spaces and lots of different people, and trying to do a job, and I just kind of love that. So if you're a Murderbot fan, be sure and pick this up. I think it's definitely a fun and diverting read. If you're not a Murderbot fan, don't start here. Like, you know, you really need to read the first 4 novellas, because they set up all the characters that are in this. Because, like, the plethora of characters from the first novella are almost most of all of them make an appearance in this story too. So I think that's like the one thing about the Murderbot stories, is since it's now been a few years since I read All Systems Red, it's hard to remember everyone's name and who is who, because there's just like a lot of characters, and for novellas, like I love the characters, but at the same time it can be a little tricky remembering every single one and who does what and what their specialty is, just so that I can kind of tell them apart, other than like Murderbot and Mensa or whatever her name is, and right. But still really love this. 5 stars. I read it in like a day or a day and a half. I couldn't put it down. It was truly great. I don't know how Martha Wells continues to write such amazing, like character-driven short work, but it's just, it's so cool. And also the universe she's created is so cool. One of these days, I'm going to get around to reading her other books. Because like I know she's got fantasy books. I want to read those. After that, I read 2 more audiobooks. So I read the next book in the Green Rider series, which was Firebrand, and this is the 6th book in the Green Rider series. And I liked this one well enough. I gave it 3.5 stars, and I think my big problem with it is like the way the stuff with Astora from the previous book with her in it. I mean, it's not the previous book, it's actually book 4. That stuff with her and like raping the king and stuff like that is just not, it's not addressed, because it's like in the mind of the author, not actually rape, and that grinds my gears. I really fucking hate that. But Firebrand had an interesting plot with Kerrigan again, and her developing as the avatar of death, and we did have some good stuff with Second Empire. But it was definitely, it was a little overshadowed with just this like, just uneasiness about what the author is doing with the king and Astora, and I just don't know. The other thing I hated about this book, and actually probably one of the primary drivers for kind of like lowering the rating, is there was this really weird and I forgot about it until I was editing this, but there was this really weird plot line with one of the elves. I think you can call elves. It's been so long since I listened to one of these. There's this really weird plot line with one of the elves who travels with Kerrigan up into the north, and he basically pawn fars, and it's so stupid and just icky. And it's like, you know, him saying, "You gotta run away before I rape you," basically. And I'm just like, really? That's what we're going with? That was just like an icky choice on the part of the author, and it really, really ruins the last 5% of the book. Leaves it on a sour note. Let's say that. Yeah. I'm gonna keep reading them though, because I want to see the conclusion of everything. And then after that, I listened to another audiobook, which was Enna Burning by Shannon Hale, and this is the sequel to the Goose Girl. I think they're called the Books of Bayern. That's what the series is called. And this is book 2, and this takes the princess's friend, her best friend from the first book, who happens to learn fire speaking, and it almost consumes her. I didn't love this. This is probably, I think, the weakest one in the series. I have since read the one after this, and I'm partway through the last book in the series. This is definitely the weakest one. I didn't even rate it in my spreadsheet, but I would probably give it like a 3-star. I really love Enna as a character. The thing I didn't like is there is like a kind of a twist, which I just didn't pick up on. Now, maybe I just didn't pick up on it, and it is actually laid out so that you could conceivably predict it happening. I think it's one of those things where it's like a character betrayal thing that you need to see coming. Otherwise, it really feels out of left field. And I didn't see it coming, so it just feels out of left field. And I can't tell if I just missed it or if it's not there. But I didn't love it. And so I feel conflicted about a lot of stuff that happens in the middle of the book because I didn't see the character thing happening. And I was just kind of like, what? So it's not my favorite, but I do love the end of it. Like the last quarter, it kind of changes direction and focus, and it becomes more about Izzy and Enna's friendship. And I really loved that part. So yeah, 3.5 stars. And overall, I really, really like the series. Like I said, I've since read more, and it is a series I would definitely feel very strongly about other people reading. Like, you read it, try it, check it out. If you like YA fantasy, I think it's a really good series. And then the last thing I read in the month of August was another short story, I believe. I have to scroll way back up here. Yes, it was a short story. This was the last short story I needed to read for the Hugo short story list for this year, and that was Open House on Haunted Hill by John Wiswell. Is that how you say his name? And the irony of this being the last of the short stories for me to read, and me taking so long to read it, is that this was the winner. This was the short story that won category this year. And I can understand why. It's very good. I think it's a very strong little short story. I'll leave a link to it down below. Check it out. It is about a sentient haunted house and a family, and I give it a solid 4 stars. Is it my pick for the category? No. I think that Advanced Word Problems in Portal Math by Ainchi Peachy, I'm probably butchering her name, is the winner of this category. That one was innovative in its structure, saying a lot of stuff about gender and kind of female identity and our place and female representation in the genre. And so Advanced Word Problems is my clear winner for the category. But Open House on Haunted Hill is pretty good. So I would definitely recommend reading it if you're interested in a little autumnal, spooky short story. We're a little late for that, but it's still November. There's still orange leaves on the trees. Go out and read it. Yeah, that was everything I read in the summer. It wasn't a ton. Mostly audiobooks, right? A couple short stories, and a mix of things like that I liked and that I didn't like. How did I do for my goals? Since it was a lot of audiobooks, one of my goals is to read more from my physical shelves and my Kindle owned books instead of relying so heavily on the library. Obviously, I didn't do that because I read a lot of stuff from the library. I read a lot of audiobooks. Those all come from the library. And I only got one book read. So this is what's remains of my 15 books to read in 2021 TBR. As you can see, I have not read much off this TBR. So and in this 3-month period, I only read one book off this TBR, and that was Mossflower. So as for my reading goals this year, I could have done better. However, my other reading goal this year was to read longer books, and I read like 3 real chonkers. Seven Deaths of an Empire was like 500 pages, and Blackveil, Firebrand, and Mirror's Sight were all really long. I think Mirror's Sight might be the longest book I have read. Either Mirror's Sight or Blackveil is 800 pages. I don't remember which one, and it's the longest book I have read this year. So I did pretty good on that challenge, interspersed with a couple of short stories. But yeah, so that's everything I read this summer. I'm going to go ahead and batch film my wrap-ups for August and October. Basically my fall reading, and that'll be coming out. That video will be coming out soon. It's probably going to be short because I didn't do a ton of reading in those months either. But, I moved. I'm somewhat settled in. You guys, I live 600 steps from our library, and our library is beautiful and dangerous. I live about 1,000 steps from a used bookstore now. Also dangerous. If you've watched this far in the video, I'll show you my tiny little book haul for this month. It is a combination of library books and books I bought at the used bookstore. For library books, and this is currently what I'm reading, I got a copy of Sword Stone Table, which is an multi-author anthology edited by Swapna Krishna and Jen Northington, and this is all queered and racially diverse King Arthur inspired retellings, short stories. So I just started reading this today. So far I'm really liking it. The first story in this, which is called The Once and Future Kadi by Ozma Zenahat Khan, gives me strong Green Knight vibes, and I'm digging it. I also got a copy of The Chosen and the Beautiful by Niveau. In my next wrap up, I'll talk about When the Tigers Came Down the Mountain by Niveau, which I read in September, I think. Really, really loved. So when I saw this, originally I was not going to read this book. I know it's gotten a ton of hype, and I was kind of like, I mean, I like The Great Gatsby, but this wasn't like running out to get a retelling of it. But when I read Nivo's other novella, I was like, I really like their writing. I'll give this a try. So I'm going to give this a try later this month. And then I also spontaneously picked up Atlas Alone by Emma Newman. This is the 4th book in the Planetfall series. I've read the other 3, and they're it's one of my favorite sci-fi series, and I was really excited to just stumble across a copy of this in the Champaign Public Library. And then I also picked up a copy of Sword of Destiny by Andrzej Sapkowski. I know I'm butchering that name. This is the 2nd short story collection, I believe chronologically, in the Witcher series. So I've also read the first short story collection, The Last Wish. I read that earlier this month. No, I read that in October. Again, you'll see that in my next wrap up. So I wanted to pick up the next one. I've also played the first game, and I've seen the Netflix series, and it's just kind of fun. It's not like the best thing I've ever read, but it is like reading kind of like a video game or playing through a video. It is very much just kind of like reading a bunch of side quests. It's just kind of like entertaining. So I'm going to keep reading these until I don't like them or whatever. They're also kind of hilariously funny as examples of 90s fantasy. So that's all my library book haul. So that's my library book haul. And then for used books, I sold a couple of books from my last quarter at college back to the used bookstore, and then I picked up a couple First one being The Bell at Sealy Head by Patricia McKillop. I know Kelsey, again, Fancy Hotly Reads, she read this, I don't know if it was recently, but she read it within the last year, I believe, or at least she posted a video talking about having read it in the last year, and she said it was really, really good, right? I hope I'm not making this up, but I really liked Patricia McKillop's, what did I read from her? The Forgotten Beasts of Eld. I got this on her recommendation, and also because I really liked The Forgotten Beasts of Eld, and I want to read more of McKillop's books. And I have Odd Magic, The Book of Atris Wolf, and In the Forest of Seer, all in these beautiful illustrated covers. And so, like, that's some beautiful fantasy cover art right there. I was excited to get that one in the same beautiful cover art. And then the other thing I bought was The Child of Prophecy by Juliette Merlier. So this is the third book in the Seven Waters trilogy. The second book is Son of the Shadows, I believe. Son of the Shadows. I haven't read Son of the Shadows yet. I did put my name down for that book at the bookstore and asked if it ever comes in for them to contact me, because I do want to keep reading in this series because I freaking loved Daughter of the Forest so much. But yeah, so that was my little book haul. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll be around a little bit more since I'm like, I have a little bit more time to read now. I have like, yeah, getting back into reading. I've got this whole, well, not this, spoiler. I've got this whole TBR thing to get through before the end of the year. I don't know if I can do it. Like, could I read all of these in the month of December? Challenge, perhaps? Anyways, let me know down in the comments if you have any questions about the books I've read, or if you've read any of them, what are your thoughts? How have y'all been doing? Let me know that too. I know I've been super absent from like everything. I haven't even really been watching much booktube. It's terrible. But life, you know? So yeah, like I said, I will have my autumnal wrap up coming out soon, and I'll see you then. Bye.